It's wonderful to have a chat to Jeff Brayley, social researcher at station sponsor McCrindle. They bring data to life, and you do that for leaders in business, in organisations, churches, community groups. Jeff, what is the data that leaders should be looking at as they look into the future?
Leaders should be using multifactorial data. It's all about variety and lots of different data sets. We want to help leaders become really powerful at impacting and shaping a positive future. And so futuristic thinking is what we want to encourage people towards. You also need to be thinking generationally, understanding how society is changing, and also be practical, not just theoretical. Leaders should have a vision for the future and a plan for today.
Now, generations are working side by side so much more. Do you have any data around that?
Absolutely. A whole report, and there's a great infographic on the generations at work right now. 4 generations in Australia, from Gen Zs aged 16 to 30, who are motivated and looking for accessible and approachable leadership, all the way up to baby boomers that are looking for proximity when looking for new work. They want something close to home. And so we've got a great infographic there available for leaders to engage and motivate their teams effectively.
Jeff, I've seen this treasure trove. It really is. You're giving full access for 7 days. So how can people actually get access to this?
You can get the 50 plus infographics, 40 plus reports, courses, all on mccrindle.com. Search McCrindle Plus and you'll find that 7-day free trial. And we hope it empowers a positive future for all of society.
Jeff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Station sponsor McCrindle, and you can get all that at mccrindle.com. Welcome to the Towards Understanding podcast. It is great to have you with us. My name's Clayton Bielen. What I love is bringing to you each and every week a phenomenal story that helps us step that bit closer towards understanding our life better, somebody else's life better, or maybe God's plan for our life better. Let's get stuck into another great story.
Towards Understanding with Clayton Bielen.
You're with Clayton, and a man who has had a huge impact across this entire nation through church work, through Youth Alive, through a whole host of various things, has just put out his new book called My Father's Son, A Generational Story. What a perfect time to talk to him on this Father's Day. Wayne Alcorn joins me. G'day, Wayne.
G'day, Clayton.
It's so good to be able to have a chat to you. Briefly, can you give us the sort of overarching description of the reason that you even wrote this story before we sort of get this book, before we sort of plow on into it?
That's a good question. I'll tell you why I wrote it. I was asked to. A mate of mine is the leader of the Bible Society in Australia and a number of expressions, which includes Kurong and a publishing house. And we were in a conversation one day after I'd spoken at a conference, and he'd heard it some time ago, and he said, you know what, we need you to write a book, and I think it should be on that subject. And I was glad to, because, you know, I spent, as you've already said, regarding, you know, my life, Youth Alive, I'd spent 20 years almost helping teenagers, and I felt there was a season of my life that I've entered into where it's time to help their dads help them. And so all that came to a head, and hey, a couple of years later, we've got a book in our hands.
Yeah. Wayne, just to step back to, maybe for those who don't know much about your world, that you've been a pastor for, decades now. You've, as you mentioned, been involved in Youth Alive for many, many years, and a big part of setting that up, running that across the country and engaging youth in music and conversations around Jesus. You're the national president of the Australian Christian Churches. You're writing books, these sorts of things. Faith has always been a part of your world. Was that something that had started from sort of family time for you really early on?
Well, firstly, it made me sound really old, mate.
I'm sorry.
You kept saying many years.
I was trying to indicate experience, not age. You know.
Well, you know, I used to run Youth Alive. My boys tell me I need to start a new one called Barely Alive, so that's another day. Look, I was born into a preacher's house, and that's there's a lot of great things about that, to be honest. But through my life, later high school years, and then in through my university years, I really became quite cynical and drifted in faith. So I really didn't come back to being, what you would say is a dedicated follower of Jesus until I was in my 20s, early 20s. So So faith has defined my life. I grew up in a household of faith. I watched parents who gave their life to that cause. And, obviously for the last 40-something years, that's what I've been doing. So faith was a very real part of it. But, there comes a point in time that you've got to make your own decisions based on convictions you have. The old preacher, I think it was David Wilkerson, who founded Teen Challenge, he said, God has no grandkids. And you don't get anywhere because of your parents' faith. And there's got to come a point in time when you decide to choose or to reject the claims of Christ. And as a 20-year-old, that's where I landed.
I'm assuming that's also why that had a huge part of being involved in what Youth Alive was, that was a time in your world and your life journey where you were asking those questions, making those serious commitments. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Clayton, there was a point in my life when I made a decision to, I'm just going to sell my life out to this thought that Jesus Christ is who he said he was. And soon after that, it wasn't that long after that, I remember my dad saying to me one day, "Are you attending the youth program tonight?" And I clearly told him that I wasn't because I found it particularly boring. To which he said, "Do you think you could do better?" And I said, "Anybody could." So he then gave me the job as youth leader, which was, it was as profound as that, to be quite honest. And, I then started conversations. I have this little thought in life that when we start talking, God starts talking. Yeah. And I started talking to other friends and peers that were doing similar things to what I was. And we realized there needed to be some gathering points where young people could realize they were part of something that was alive, that was life-giving, and, could really help them, and something they could actually bring their friends who weren't people of faith, but from school and university they could bring them to. And ultimately that's where Youth Alive originated. And that's, where it became. We wanted to give kids something that was fun and colourful and, dare I say it, loud to be part of. And in the process we saw hundreds of thousands of young people affected for good.
So this is a huge part of your world, being a part of church, as we've talked about too. We want to specifically zone in on this Father's Day around this idea that you have of helping, as you said, the fathers of these youth now. Why do you think this is such a critical space, just blanketly? Why is it so important to be helping dads?
Because, again, if I can go back to my formative years in leadership, I did a lot of work helping kids in trouble. And one day it dawned on me, I've never been to court, or I've never been to a police station with a young person that had a great relationship with their dad. And I realized there's an issue here. And it's compounded now as time's gone on, marriage breakdown and the effects on the family. And even, sometimes marriage hasn't broken down, but work requirements, fly in, fly out. There's all kinds of reasons why there's an empty chair at the family table. Sometimes it's unexpected death. Sometimes it's, family breakdown. Other times, dad's present in body, but he's not present in attention. And that has a knock-on effect. And I can't count the number of times that I've become aware of the fact that without the Father's love in a young person's life, it seems that nothing and no one can fill it until they have a revelation of the real heartbeat of this book, and that is that there is a God who says, "Call me Father," and he'll love you in an unbelievable, unconditional way. Yeah. So that's what drove the book, plus the fact that I saw it in my own family through, and again, it's in the story of this book, just the story of my own father, and we might get to talk about that, but he grew up in a highly dysfunctional family, and it affected his life right until he was in his mid-20s when he made a decision for faith himself.
Yeah. Well, we might talk about that in a couple of moments' time. Can we zone in too around when we talk about father, and I suppose I'm especially thinking as well of those who maybe are listening and going, well, I'm not in church like you are, Wayne, or you are, Clayton, all that often. Are you talking about God? What's the difference between God or Jesus? And how do you, as you talk about Father, and people hear God and Jesus and those sort of things, how do you distinguish and look at the characteristics of what you're meaning when you're talking about sort of God the Father?
Well, you're getting into a deep theological
I wasn't
depth here on a Sunday, not on Father's Day when everybody's been around a barbecue. Clayton.
That's true.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. Do you remember what we call the Lord's Prayer?
Yeah.
When Jesus' disciples, it's in the book of Luke, one of Jesus' friends. He wrote this book called Luke. And there was a day when some of his disciples watched Jesus praying. And he prays a prayer because his disciples said, Jesus, we just saw you talking to your Father, God the Father, who sent Jesus to represent him into the earth, born of a virgin, right, living a sinless life. They watched Jesus pray to God his Father and said, could you teach us how to pray? We want to connect with the creator of the universe the way you did. And he said, sure, when you pray like this. Now remember, these are Jews that are around him. They knew God by all these lofty terms, Jehovah, El Shaddai. I mean, all kinds of incredible, like, wow, big time, distant, huge God. Now they're hearing Jesus pray to God and call him Father, our Father. In fact, it's an even more intimate term than like that. It's Dad or Daddy. So you can call the creator of the universe Daddy. And I'm here to show you him. I'm here to show you his heart and his character. But you can pray, and I will help you pray, and I will help you know him as a father. And it's a radical shift. I can only imagine the jaws dropping as these Jewish men and women were watching Jesus pray and say, pray like this, call him Dad. Like, it's a radical shift. And when we come to Jesus, he actually shows us who the Father is. Yeah. Powerful thought.
Yeah. And I know it's that concept too. And as I've been reading up before we had this interview as well, you talk actually a bit around one gentleman who was talking to you about this idea of why he would say, hey, I've been a follower of Jesus for 20, 30 years, but when you ask me to pray the Lord's Prayer, I can't do that because I can't relate to this father idea, this dad idea. I had such a bad experience. And that is something that is, even for those who maybe have been walking in a life of faith for a long time, it's something that is a part that, in one sense, they're missing because of an earthly father experience, right?
Exactly. Just the word conjures up images. And say, call God Father, they think of sometimes dysfunction, abandonment, abuse, and it's tragic. In fact, that man that you're referring to, I said to him, so when you pray, do you talk to God the Father? He said, no, I talk to Jesus and hope he passes it on. Now, it's kind of funny, but it's kind of sad. Yeah. But in reality, it's actually true because the Bible tells me that Jesus is our advocate. He sits at the right hand of the Father and he represents us to the Father. I get that. But what he's saying is there's a blockage for me. I can't call God Father because my father was so cruel. Yeah. And God wants to heal that part of our life. He doesn't want us to stay stuck in that space. Yeah. And, that man, I've been able to walk with him and actually see him actually begin to make progress in that area of his life, which is great.
Yeah, it's great. Wayne, is it a way that we need to then think about God the Father in the right way? Or is it, you sort of mentioned that the path of healing, is it more that, it's not like if we all think of the word daddy and then that's going to really help us, right? Or is it more actually, I want to have a posturing towards this idea. I understand that I have a whole lot of blocks and I'm willing to start a journey towards that. Is there, I'm assuming that's important, but is there a magic bullet that helps us take those first steps, I suppose is what I'm asking? Yeah,
it's a decision. It's a decision to start a journey where our hearts are healed. There's a little verse in the Bible. It says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So it's not really what we say, it's where it comes from. And you can tell where somebody's at from the inside by what you hear them say. And we can use all the words. And this is the difference between just having a religious experience versus a genuine relationship with God. You can have all the words and it all can sound right and look right, but if it's not sincere, that will show. But when there's a genuine work of God in our heart, it'll come out. And I think that you said the magic bullet is really the starting point, and that is, God, I'm actually going to let you heal my beat up heart. And every one of us have got areas in our life that God just needs to do a work on the inside. That's the beauty of the Christian faith, is it's not about what it looks like on the outside. I know some genuine followers of Jesus that don't look that great. They're a bit shabby on the outside, but wow, on the inside it's getting healed. Versus people who dress it up and make it look fancy, but on the inside it's all broken. God wants to flip that and heal us from the inside out. And that's where it starts. God, I've got disappointments in my past. I've got regrets. I've got areas where I felt like nobody was there for me. Even my own father, he let me down. But God, I'm going to ask you to help me forgive. I'm going to ask you to start a work of your healing by your grace in my life. Then, hey, anything can happen from that point.
This Father's Day, we're having a chat to Wayne Alcorn. He's the author of this book, My Father's Son, A Generational Story. Wayne, we've talked a whole lot of various, big picture ideas and thoughts and concepts in our first part of our discussion. I'm wondering about, can we get down to some of those really specific stories? And I know you mentioned your own father and looking at him and some of that journey. Could you share some of that story with us?
Yeah, my dad was my hero, and he was a character, larger than life. And, we said goodbye to him in October of 2021. And the man that we farewelled and honoured on that Wednesday morning is very different to the man who walked the streets of a country town called Dalby 70 years earlier. The book tells his story at length, but my dad's father had been married 3 times, was a World War I vet, had been through all kinds of pain. And, the old story, hurt people, hurt people. There was a level of that in my father's father. And it resulted in my dad's dad died by the time he was 19. And then from there, my father spiraled even further. I remember asking my dad one day, and I discovered this. I don't know what about older women, but as men get into their later life, 80s, 90s, they want to tell you their whole story. And I had some very meaningful conversations with my dad, who, by the way, never told his story in front of me other than once in my entire life. Mm. He just said, that's not me anymore, which was amazing. But I did get him to share his story once, and then as he got older, I'd go and sit in his little unit. He'd tell me more. And, he told me from when his father died from 19, a father that, I said to him one day, what did your dad think of you? He said, I don't know. He never told me. Mm. And there was just voids there in that relationship. So from 19 to 24, my father spiraled out of control. He got into trouble with the police. He became the town drunk. There's a point in his life when he was just such a mess. He had no teeth. He was in trouble with the law, and he got to a point at 24 years of age, he decided it was just not worth living. And, he's lying in a cell on a Sunday thinking, no one cares if I live or die, so I might as well just get out of their road. So he went to a friend's house, and he asked for the gun that was in that house. And to his shock, and we would now say that somehow in the midst of it was just the goodness and kindness of God. That gun wasn't in the house. It had been loaned to a cousin to go shooting. So my father planned to end it all. So he thought, what am I going to do? And the only thing really happening in Dalby, it's a small country town up here. It's a little bigger now, but up on the Darling Downs. So I thought, I'm just going to go and do what I do on some Sunday nights. I'm just going to go down Main Street, and I'm going to heckle the Christians that are singing down on the corner. And there was an old guy who ended up becoming one of my dad's closest friends. His name was Harold. Harold standing on the back of a truck, and he's preaching a simple message using the words of Jesus, whom the Son sets free is free indeed. My dad's standing there with all his mates. My dad wasn't wearing shoes. He didn't even have a shirt on, right? He's quite drunk. And they're laughing at these people telling their stories of faith, and Harold doing his little sermon. And at the end, a group of singers stepped up, about 5 or 6 of them, and they sung a song. And it's an old famous hymn. It says, come home, all who are weary, come home. And something dropped in my father's heart, and he thought, you know what, that's me. And he stepped out of the crowd, and his mates thought, oh, here he goes, Alex again. He's going to go and pick another fight. And to their shock, when he arrived and found himself at that truck, he dropped to his knees in the gutter. And a man came up to him and said, son, do you want to pray the sinner's prayer? And he said, I don't know what the blank sinner's prayer is, mate, but I need to talk to God. And he said, God, if you'll help me, even if you'll help me get up because I'm so drunk, but if you'll help me stand up and if you'll help me navigate life, I'll follow you for the rest of my days. And that's what he did. And, not so long later, he went to Bible college, met my mum. They got married 4 years later. And to be honest, Clayton, I wasn't born into the home that was like his life. Mm. I was born into a home that was filled with love and kindness. But it just changed everything. And so wind the clock forward 70 years, I remember my niece, she steps up to the mic the grandkids, 5 grandkids to my dad. They all honoured this old patriarch. And my niece stood up and she looked at this huge photo that was on the screen in one of our buildings. And she looked, and this big crowd gathered. It was huge, to be honest. And she looked at them and she looked at the photo and she said, I wonder what the people that saw my granddad staggering through a small country town 70 years ago would think of this crowd that's here to honour him and this patriarch who's given us such a legacy. And then she just could have dropped the mic. She said, the only difference between that drunk and this hero was Jesus. It's amazing. And literally that one decision, Clayton, changed his life and our entire family tree.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't
it? And there are people today, for some people, Father's Day, it's a great day, celebration. There's family all around and barbecues and all that. For other people, it's been a tough day, a real tough day, and I get it. You know, some fathers may have regrets. Some sons and daughters may have a sense of, you know, the failings of a generation before them, and I get it. But if I could speak to everyone right now, I'd simply say, just take a moment and just invite a God who cares for you to actually come and speak to your heart, and he will actually take you forward. Despite the problems of your past, you can't change your past, but your future can look different if you make the right decisions today.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, you know, maybe as you're hearing what Wayne's saying too, that you're thinking, I just need to talk this through with someone, or would someone stand next to me like we just heard, you know, Wayne's dad had somebody there standing next to him. This is why our care line's there. And they are there right now, every single day of the year. If you just want to give them a call, talk to them, they can even pray with you if you like. Their number, 9583 2273 or 9583-CARE. If you use the letter pad on your phone, 9583-CARE. Wayne, thank you so much for sharing that story. It's so powerful what Jesus does do to change our world and to change our life from wherever it might be as we go. As we do sort of wrap up our conversation, I have a couple of questions I want to ask specifically as we do sit in this Father's Day, and as you mentioned, you know, maybe things aren't perfect, and I want to frame it from that way. And I suppose the first would be if it's a dad themselves who's been listening to your story and they're going, you know what, I think maybe I haven't quite been where I'm supposed to be. I haven't been engaged with the kids, or I haven't been looking at the right things, or I haven't been approaching what I need to do. What would be your encouragements for a dad who's perhaps a bit convicted by the fact that they want to make sure by next Father's Day they are a far better dad? What would be your encouragement? What's their first steps?
Don't beat yourself up. You're not going to get anywhere doing that. Have honest conversations. Have an honest conversation with the man in the mirror. Have an honest conversation to your God and ask him to help you. And then ultimately, have an honest conversation with your kids. Tell them, I can do better. I want to do better. Tell them that you love them unconditionally and that you want to see a future that's better for both them and for you. Start somewhere. Just start from a place of loving them and just acknowledging you're a flawed human being. Hey, welcome to the human race. We all are. And just say, hey, you know what? I think we can have a future that's going to be better than what it is. Some men listening to this right now, you weren't even able to be with your kids today. And that makes it pretty challenging. Maybe you're not able to actually have a face-to-face with them. Maybe it's just time to drop them a little note. Just drop a letter and say, maybe there's some way that we can start moving forward together.
The flip is the other question I want to ask, and that's if there's a child who's maybe a teenager, maybe they're even older than that, and the relationship with dad has not been good. What's your encouragement for them? Is it to, well, I shouldn't presume, but they're thinking, hey, look, dad doesn't seem to be changing. This isn't having this space. These things aren't occurring, and I haven't had this opportunity to grow like that, and he doesn't seem to be changing. What would be your encouragement to them?
Well, firstly, forgive them. I'm sure we've all got disappointments. I guarantee my sons have got disappointments with me. None of us are perfect, and all of us failed in certain areas. I get that. So forgive them. I'm not sure the levels of trust you can rebuild quickly. That's something that each of us have to determine. But I think just just start this level of conversation that allows them to maybe tell you a little of their story. It's interesting, when you start meeting people and you hear their story, all of a sudden the penny drops. We start learning the why behind the what. And a lot of people's dysfunction flows out of things that happened in their past. And, that, again, if I can refer back to my own father, even my dad in his 90s, he was a preacher all my life. He acknowledged he still wrestled with insecurity, even in his latter years. It's because of stuff that happened in his formative stage. And it's possible that a dad who you think failed them was maybe on the receiving end of a failed situation in their family growing up too. So maybe God can give you a little bit of understanding, a little bit of care for them. It doesn't excuse what they did. I'm not here to pardon or excuse anybody. But it might just help you expand your capacity to understand and love them with all of their faults and their problems.
Wayne, thank you so much on this Father's Day to sharing your story and your dad's story, and as you did share too, we put our heart goes to you, our prayers to you as well in the second Father's Day without your dad, and all of what it is for so many today, as you've been recognising as well. We certainly know this is one of those days full of emotion in a whole lot of various areas. So thank you so much for sharing so much of your time with us tonight as well. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. Have a good one.
Towards Understanding with Clayton Bielen. Only one sponsorship reaches 90 Christian radio stations and major cities across Australia and New Zealand. Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen. Find this exciting opportunity on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
It's wonderful to have a chat to Jeff Brayley, social researcher at station sponsor McCrindle. They bring data to life, and you do that for leaders in business, in organisations, churches, community groups. Jeff, what is the data that leaders should be looking at as they look into the future?
Leaders should be using multifactorial data. It's all about variety and lots of different data sets. We want to help leaders become really powerful at impacting and shaping a positive future. And so futuristic thinking is what we want to encourage people towards. You also need to be thinking generationally, understanding how society is changing, and also be practical, not just theoretical. Leaders should have a vision for the future and a plan for today.
Now, generations are working side by side so much more. Do you have any data around that?
Absolutely. A whole report, and there's a great infographic on the generations at work right now. 4 generations in Australia, from Gen Zs aged 16 to 30, who are motivated and looking for accessible and approachable leadership, all the way up to baby boomers that are looking for proximity when looking for new work. They want something close to home. And so we've got a great infographic there available for leaders to engage and motivate their teams effectively.
Jeff, I've seen this treasure trove. It really is. You're giving full access for 7 days. So how can people actually get access to this?
You can get the 50-plus infographics, 40-plus reports, courses, all on McCrindle.com. Search McCrindle Plus and you'll find that 7-day free trial. And we hope it empowers a positive future for all of society.
Jeff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Station sponsor McCrindle, and you can get all that at McCrindle.com.